Welcome to the Deep Dive.
You.
This is where we stop whispering about life's biggest questions and start hitting them with some actual verifiable data.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're tackling a big one. It's that question of, how much sex is truly normal, and is the number you have in your head actually the right one?
It's such a foundational question, and our sources today, they draw from some really major long-term studies. We're talking institutions like the University of Toronto, Mississauga, the Kinsey Institute.
So serious research.
Oh, absolutely. And what they do is they move us beyond all that cultural judgment and give us these statistical thresholds that actually dictate satisfaction, not just how often.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission here is to give you, the listener, a shortcut past all that anxiety. We're going to define that scientific sweet spot for emotional satisfaction.
Right.
We'll look at how age really impacts things. We'll dismantle some of those intimacy myths. And this is the big one, uncover some pretty shocking life-altering health benefits.
Especially around cardiac health, which is where the anxiety is just through the roof.
Exactly. So we're focused purely on the data.
Mm.
The goal is to give you what you need to confidently ditch that anxiety that comes from comparing yourself to some, mythical average.
That's it.
So let's dive right in. The core of the issue, really, is this whole quantity versus quality debate. Pop culture is constantly telling us more is better.
Always.
What does the research actually say about long-term happiness?
Well, what's so fascinating here is this consistent finding of a clear happiness plateau. The landmark work comes from Amy Muse at the University of Toronto.
Okay.
She analyzed this huge longitudinal data set. It spanned over 23 years, covering more than 30,000 people in committed relationships.
30,000 people over 2 decades. I mean, that's not just a snapshot. That is a statistically robust picture of human habits.
It really is. And the core finding was, well, it was definitive. Sexual frequency is crucial for happiness, but only up to a point.
Okay, what's the point?
What the researchers found was that having sex once per week is entirely sufficient to maintain that optimal emotional balance and relationship satisfaction.
Just once a week.
Just once. It seems we hit this critical mass of connection at about 7 days. If a couple is having sex once a week, they've basically maxed out the happiness benefit from that specific activity.
So what about the couples having sex more often? 2, 3, 4 times a week?
That's the key part of the data. They did not report significantly higher happiness levels.
Well, the needle stops moving.
The happiness needle stops moving, exactly. I mean, the couple is still getting all the other intrinsic benefits, the bonding, the shared priority. But in terms of that specific happiness metric, it flatlines.
But I'm guessing the downside of falling below that weekly benchmark is pretty real, right?
Oh, absolutely. The data was just as clear on that. Having sex less than once per week was directly correlated with a negative impact on the couple's overall well-being. So it seems once a week is kind of the minimal viable product for maintaining that connection.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, because the source material had this striking comparison that puts a value on this weekly connection that, everyone understands. Money.
Yes, the paycheck comparison. It made a lot of headlines when the study came out.
It's bad.
Muse's research actually quantified the impact, the psychological boost that a couple got from moving from, say, monthly sex to weekly sex.
Yeah.
It was comparable to the happiness gained from getting a huge pay raise. We're talking up to $50,000 more per year compared to their peers.
That is an astonishing return on investment. I mean, prioritizing maybe 20 or 30 minutes of intimate time a week gives you the same happiness boost as suddenly being significantly wealthier than the people around you.
It suggests that this fundamental need for connection and bonding is being met. Our society focuses so much on external things like wealth for well-being, right?
Of course.
But this data just shows that when that deep relational need is met, the happiness gains are so high they actually rival major financial success. It just confirms that, relational wealth is paramount.
Okay, but if we accept that once a week is enough to stabilize happiness, what happens when you start feeling that pressure to do more?
Well, that leads directly into what's called the pressure paradox. We saw findings from a Carnegie Mellon study that put this to the test.
Oh, so?
They took couples and literally instructed them to double their frequency. And instead of reporting more joy, the couples actually reported a slight decrease in happiness.
That feels so counterintuitive. If more doesn't hurt, why would actively forcing it make them unhappier?
It suggests that when you introduce an external mandate, when you turn intimacy into a chore or a goal, it just kills the enthusiasm and spontaneity.
Right, it's not a choice anymore.
Exactly. The joy of connection just diminishes when it feels like a required assignment. It's all about natural fulfillment, not scheduled duty.
So as relationships mature and life gets complicated, you've got kids, careers, physical changes like testosterone decreasing frequency is obviously going to change.
Right.
If we just look at the averages, what do the hard numbers tell us about frequency across a lifespan?
Well, the Kinsey Institute data gives us a really good benchmark here, and it shows that, yes, frequency naturally goes down as people get older, but this is mostly driven by logistics, fatigue, hormonal shifts.
Not necessarily a drop in desire.
Not at all. It's not a drop in desire or satisfaction. So for the younger group, ages 19 to 29, the average is high. It's about 112 sexual encounters per year.
Which is roughly, what, twice a week?
About 2.15 times per week, yeah. Then you move to the next bracket, 29 to 39, and that average drops pretty significantly to 86 times a year.
Okay, so that's about 1.65 times per week, a pretty big drop.
It's a 25% drop, and that 29 to 39 bracket is often peak family and career time, so it's a lack of time and energy.
Which brings us to long-term couples. There's this huge cultural anxiety that married people just stop having sex. Does the data actually support that?
Not entirely. I mean, the frequency does decline, but it doesn't just vanish. For instance, some studies on married couples show that a big chunk, 34%, still report having sex 2 to 3 times per week.
So still pretty active.
Yeah, but the more insightful finding is how the focus shifts away from quantity being the main driver of happiness.
So where does the satisfaction come from then?
Well, the sources noted this really interesting trend. Older married women were often found to be happier with their intimate lives than younger women.
That's fascinating. Why?
The hypothesis from the sexologists is that it's because they, quote, know themselves and their partners better.
That is such a crucial distinction. So we're moving from the sort of energy-driven frequency of youth to the quality and communication of mature relationships.
Exactly. It suggests a few things. First, there's less pressure to perform or, live up to some external average. Second, greater self-awareness means they can communicate their needs more effectively, which leads to more fulfilling encounters. They're prioritizing mutuality and understanding over just repetition.
And even at the far end of the age spectrum, the activity still continues, right?
Absolutely. Even men in the 70-plus age group reported ongoing intimacy. The study noted 63% of men in relationships and 15% of married men in that bracket were having sex several times a month. Desire doesn't have an expiration date.
It just adapts.
It adapts to the body and the relationship. So for you, the listener, who might be worrying about your own number, it all comes back to the same core conclusion from every expert.
Which is?
The true normal is whatever level provides mutual satisfaction for both partners. It doesn't matter what the external metrics say. If you're both communicating and feel connected and satisfied, you are, for all intents and purposes, statistically perfect.
It sounds like so much of our anxiety comes from these widespread cultural myths that the science is actively challenging.
That's completely right. Justin Garcia, he's the executive director of the Kinsey Institute. He calls this a widespread sexual literacy problem.
A sexual literacy problem. I like that.
Yeah, we're just fed these persistent, often inaccurate myths, and it causes all this unnecessary performance anxiety.
Okay, so let's challenge the biggest one, the one Hollywood loves. That spontaneous sex is the only true measure of passion, and that planning it kills the pleasure.
Oh, yeah. The science completely dismantles that myth, especially for busy long-term relationships. Research from Amy Muse, again, found that couples who schedule sex...
Who put it on the calendar.
Yes, who consciously block out time for intimacy, they enjoy it just as much as, or even more than, those who wait for some, magical impulse to strike.
Wait, hold on. If scheduling works, why did being instructed to double their frequency in that other study fail? Isn't that just a different word for the same thing?
That's a great question. It's a critical nuance. Scheduling in a healthy relationship is an act of mutual priority. It's an agreement to nurture the connection, and it creates this positive anticipation.
I see.
The Carnegie Mellon failure was about an external instruction and an arbitrary quantity goal. It turned intimacy into a metric for a study. Planning enhances anticipation. Being mandated to double up creates resentment.
I think everyone listening can relate to how hard spontaneity is when you have kids or shift work. The idea that planning creates anticipation is actually a huge relief.
It gives couples back control. It signals commitment and allows for preparation, which often leads to a higher quality connection.
Okay, myth number 2. Fantasies must stay secret. You have to hide them away because you're afraid of causing conflict or revealing something abnormal.
This myth thrives because people just don't realize how common fantasies are. Justin Lee Miller's research found that nearly 97% of people have sexual fantasies.
97%. So basically everyone.
It's a nearly universal part of our mental life,
Mhm.
and the sources show that sharing them is usually beneficial. Most people who share them with a partner report positive results, a stronger bond, more excitement, better satisfaction.
But there has to be a caveat there. You can't just blurt out every single thought, can you?
Absolutely not. The experts advise what they call reflective sharing. You have to consider your partner's feelings and your real motivation. If the goal is to deepen intimacy, it's usually positive. If it's something deeply threatening to your partner,
Maybe not.
maybe not, or it needs to be handled with extreme care. Communication has to be the priority.
Okay, moving past the psychological benefits, let's talk about pure biology. The sources were full of evidence about the physiological benefits of regular sex.
Yeah, the physical benefits are huge. It strengthens your immune system by raising levels of immunoglobulin A, which is your first line of defense against infections. And crucially, it improves cardiovascular health.
I've heard it compared to a low-impact workout, but is it doing more than just raising your heart rate a bit?
It is. It's like light to moderate physical activity, which helps lower blood pressure and serves as a great indicator of overall vascular health. And biochemically, it's like a little pharmaceutical factory.
How so?
The release of neurotransmitters after orgasm endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, they are the body's natural anxiety and stress reducers. It improves your sleep, it improves your mood.
The sources even had a really specific kind of dramatic claim about longevity.
Yes. There was a finding from a Harvard study on men between 45 and 59, which suggested having sex 3 times a week could potentially extend life expectancy by a full decade.
Oh.
Now, you have to be careful with claims like that, but it does underscore the bigger point. Regular sexual activity is a positive contributor to a longer life.
But maybe the most critical area where this matters is in recovery from serious medical events, like after a heart attack, post-MI. I mean, for those patients, the anxiety around any physical exertion must be paralyzing.
The fear is profound, and it's a major health crisis in itself. After a heart attack, 25 to 40% of men experience erectile dysfunction, and up to 70% of all patients develop these avoidance behaviors.
They just stop completely.
They stop. They're terrified the exertion will trigger another heart attack or sudden cardiac death.
That avoidance has to be a huge blow to their quality of life. What does the hard science say about the actual risk?
The science is a direct intervention against this fear. A definitive study by Muller and colleagues showed that sexual activity is not a factor that triggers heart attacks, not in the general population, and not in cardiac patients.
So the fear is unfounded.
Largely unfounded. In fact, people who engage in regular physical exercise, and sex falls into that category, have a decreased risk. Regular sexual activity is actually seen as having a protective effect.
So if the fear is so common, then sexual counseling needs to be mandatory for these patients right away. What kind of advice should they be getting?
Absolutely. It should be implemented early, ideally before they even leave the hospital. Doctors need to confirm that sexuality is possible and recommended.
And practical advice.
Practical advice, yes. Discussing alternatives to coitus so they know intimacy isn't just one thing. And crucial safety measures. Avoid big meals or heavy drinking beforehand, and use less strenuous positions like side lying, which minimizes exertion.
We also have to talk about the medications, right? Sometimes the drugs themselves are part of the problem.
That's a key point that gets missed. Certain cardiac meds, some beta blockers like propranolol, for example, can cause sexual difficulties.
Like erectile dysfunction.
Exactly, or anejaculation. If patients experience these things, they have to talk to their doctor. Often, there are alternatives with fewer side effects. The path to heart health shouldn't unintentionally kill your intimacy.
So the message for someone recovering from a heart event is clear. Sexuality isn't something to be feared. It's scientifically proven to be a healthy, recommended activity that contributes to rehabilitation and longevity.
That's the takeaway.
This deep dive has provided some incredibly powerful takeaways. We learned that monthly sex is the happiness benchmark for couples, and aiming higher doesn't really boost satisfaction further. We saw that age changes frequency, but not the potential for real satisfaction, especially for older women. We established that planning intimacy is a valid tool that builds anticipation. And finally, that regular sexual activity is medically protective, even for those recovering from serious heart events.
Right. The fear that sex will cause a heart attack is definitively unfounded.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over.
If science shows us that one dedicated encounter a week is enough to stabilize happiness, yet our society and our own anxieties pressure us to aim for so much more, what are we truly seeking when we worry about the number? Is it authentic connection, or is it just validation against a myth?
And what would happen if we all just stopped counting and started prioritizing quality, communication, and mutual enjoyment? That is the thought we leave you with today. Until next time, we hope you take this knowledge and use it to enhance your life. Thank you for diving deep with us.